remembering that spirit has no gender, even though on the physical plane we have male and female. There's an anecdote about a segment of people of the Jewish faith who, whenever a woman enters the room, it is announced, Solise has arrived. Now it is said that Solise was a very wise and articulate woman. So when the women got together and said that they were utterly tired of male domination, they decided that they would petition God and make Solise their spokeswoman. So all the women stood on each other's shoulders, and they placed Solise at the top so that she was closest to heaven. But the woman on the bottom was disabled and slipped, so the whole edifice toppled, and Solise was lost in the confusion. But even today, when a woman enters the room, it is announced, Solise has arrived. Now, you remember that story about the time wisdom and luck met on the road, and they got into a very severe argument who was El Supremo. So, as it happened, just at that moment, in a far distant place, a child was born, a young boy, and it so happened that he was born into a very poor family of shepherds. But it was decided that wisdom would take over first. And so it was found that this young boy, when he grew, was not only clever, but he was very deft and adept at everything that he did. So at a very early age, he was espied by a jeweler who took him on as an apprentice, and he became a very, very, very able person working with gold and silver and the like. But he lived in a very small place, and he felt that there wasn't much future for him there, so he decided to move on to other things, take on adventures. So he set out for the city, and very soon he became an apprentice to a tailor. And of course, with his abilities, very soon he even surpassed the tailor himself in the way he designed clothing and sewed. And as it happened, this tailor was a tailor for the monarchy. The king would have his raiments made by this tailor, and the king found that these clothes of late were not only very well designed, but also very well made, and he asked the tailor, and the tailor, of course, claimed this for himself, saying it was he himself who had made the designs and done the sewing, when it was indeed the young man. So the young man knew that there was not much future here for him. But as it happened, it was spread abroad throughout all of that place that the king's daughter, who was not only beautiful, but also very, very clever, was of marriageable age, and she herself had announced that she would only marry someone who was able to elicit a response from her. And the edict was made that whatever suitor came along who was not able to do so would have his head lopped off his shoulders. So it was that many suitors came along and were not able to elicit from the princess the response, and so they had their heads lopped from their shoulders. But our young man, having heard this, said, well, what have I got to lose? I'm going to present myself, and I'm going to make the princess speak. So he presented himself to the palace, and even though from his attire he was adjudged to be a very simple kind of person of no royalty or repute, he was taken into the presence of the princess, who, sitting there in attendance with several servants who were there as witnesses. But our young man, instead of addressing himself to the princess, he looked up at the chandelier and he said, "Chandelier, I want to pose a question to you. See if you can give me the answer." He said, starting his story, there were 3 men who went on a pilgrimage. One was a woodworker, a carpenter, the second was a tailor, and the third was a teacher. And on their travels they had to rest overnight, so one of them had to keep watch because they were in an area where there were said to be wild animals and robbers and the like. So as it happened, the first one to take watch was the wood carver, and to while away the hours he found himself a piece of wood nearby and started to whittle. And he whittled the form of a maiden, and just when he'd finished his whittling, it was time for him to wake up the tailor to take his watch. So when the tailor was woken up and he saw this naked female lying there and happened to have cloth and needle with him, he immediately set to pass the time making her a garment, which he did. And then just as he was finishing the last threads, it was time to wake up the teacher. And when the teacher woke up and saw this rather attractive being lying there inert, he decided that he would teach her to speak. And this is exactly what he did. So in the morning when the 3 of them awoke, they saw this maiden beautifully clad and alive, and so each of them claimed her for himself. The woodworker saying, well, I whittled her, she belongs to me, and the tailor saying, well, I clad her, she's mine, and the teacher saying, yes, but I taught her to speak and gave her life. Candelabra, can you tell me which one was chosen to take her as his bride? And immediately the princess answered, it was the one who made her speak and gave her life. But it so happened that the servants had fallen asleep and did not hear the princess speak. So they are judging him to be this simple fellow, and it wouldn't matter if his head got locked. He was taken away so that in the morning he would have his head taken from his shoulders. But just as the guillotine was set up and the young man was taken down, Luck said to Wisdom, "You've done a very good job so far, but it can't happen without me. Let me step in." And so, as it happened at that moment, the princess came out on her balcony and looked down and saw the young man about to have his head lopped, and sent immediately a servant down to say, "Duna, he's the one who made me speak. He's the man I'm going to marry." And so it was. His life was saved, and we know what happened then. But the end of the story is that after this, Wisdom and Luck became boon companions, and they are still together even today. So the question that arises out of this story for us is, in our experience, what is this luck? We know what wisdom is, gathered with knowledge and experiences, but luck, from our own life's experiences, what is luck?
It's a connection with the dead.
Mm-hmm.
So that things are happening without will.
Fate, kismet, karma, destiny, or something else?
I think it's surrender and listening.
Uh-huh.
And if I haven't got an agenda and I'm watchful, I get lucky.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I would say it's what divine will, or God
Okay.
will,
Uh-huh.
because
So is it like listening to like ourselves? Like for example, if I'm driving along and I'm over the speed limit and then something says slow down, Bonnie, and I can slow down and I can turn the corner and there will be the police.
Yes.
So is that's like listening to this here?
Uh-huh.
Or this here sending a quick message like you better slow down. Hacker will be really annoyed if you have another $280 fine. Oh, that might be fear.